Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shelley. I'm the Director of Bee City Canada, and I'm glad that you could all join us today. Have the great pleasure of welcoming Dr. Una Fitzpatrick. She's come all the way from Ireland. She's the project coordinator of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. So I'm going to let Una take it away.
Thanks, Shelley, and thank you for the invite. So I'm really delighted to get a chance to speak to you today. So what I thought I would do was just to explain about the All Ireland Pollinator Plan and then talk through the lessons that we've learned so far. So, but if anyone wants to ask questions as we go along, then please feel free to do that. I work in a place called the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So it's sort of like a biological records centre, or bit like a central statistics office, but for plant and animal information. So I was going to start, I'll just say a wee tiny bit about the biodiversity that we have in Ireland. So we have 31,500 species living in 117 different habitats. We know biodiversity is worth about €2.6 billion per annum in Ireland, but unfortunately of our habitats, only 9% are in a good state. And of the species we've assessed, 17% are threatened with extinction from Ireland. So much like the rest of the world, I think biodiversity loss is a huge problem here. So, and I think what I find most frightening is that I think we're creating this new normal all the time. You know, so within the last 50 years, we've seen increases in mechanization, intensification, urbanization, commercialization, and hidden within all that progress, you know, you can get downfalls. But often, by the time it's realized, generations have grown up with that as a norm. You know, and that could be in the way that we treat people or manage our services, or in the way that we manage the landscape. So when this happens, you have a bigger issue, I think, because you're trying then to bring about a whole societal change to deal with it. So what we've been trying to do is to identify really simple vehicles that could be used to sell a biodiversity message to a wide audience. And pollinators are fantastic for that, as I'm sure you're well aware. So, you know, they're an element of biodiversity that people understand and can relate to. You can communicate about pollinators in a very clean and simple way, whereas often biodiversity itself is quite complex. You can easily monitor changes in pollinators, and also then obviously protecting pollinators has knock-on benefits for biodiversity generally. So, as well, in Ireland, the plight of our pollinators is sort of typical of what's happening to biodiversity generally. So in Ireland, we've got 99 different bee species. So we have the honeybee, then 21 different types of bumblebees and 77 different types of solitary bees. And we know that of those wild pollinators in Ireland, 1/3 are threatened with extinction from the island. So not a very happy picture. And I suppose you might think, well, that's bad enough, but what about the common species? And what we know is with our common bumblebees, so for our common bumblebees, we know that the abundance of those has declined by about 14% just since 2012. So huge, huge issues for pollinators in Ireland and elsewhere around the world, I think. Really, I suppose it's a bit simple to explain it like this, but you know, the rare species are disappearing because of the loss of semi-natural habitats here, and really then the common species are declining in abundance as a consequence of how we manage the rest of the landscape. So the approach that we've taken in Ireland to this, first of all, I should say that there was an element of just waiting for the time to be right. So we felt, you know, for probably the last decade, we've been, you know, in the back of our mind thinking we should really do something about pollinators, but we really wanted to wait until the right time. And we were waiting for various things to be in place. We wanted there to be enough evidence-based studies from around the world, Europe, elsewhere, on how to help. We wanted enough public perception of the problem and the importance of pollinators here in Ireland. And we wanted to have a monitoring scheme in place so that we'd have baseline data before we started anything. So we set up the All Ireland Bumblebee Monitoring Scheme in 2011. It's a citizen science scheme, so that's been generating baseline data. So we had that in place. So really, I suppose from 2014, we felt we were in a position to, you know, to move towards some sort of strategy to address pollinator declines in Ireland. And, once we got to that point, I think we sat down and decided, well, if you have a problem, what do you do? And this is what I think you do. Firstly, I think you have to decide if it's important. You have to critically assess that problem and how serious it is. You have to identify the causes, collectively agree a positive framework to address it, then identify evidence-based actions to help, communicate those properly, develop a partnership approach where possible, and then track progress. Is what you're doing actually working? So this one, really agreeing a positive framework, that is the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. So what we're trying to do is come together and agree a positive framework to address pollinator losses in Ireland. So it was published in September 2015, developed by a 16-member steering group. We had a big consultation phase, both with the public and with stakeholders. And in the end, we were really overwhelmed by the amount of support that it got. So 68 governmental and non-governmental organisations agreed to support it. And it's identified 81 actions to make Ireland pollinator friendly. So there's a steering group which oversees the implementation, and that's coordinated by the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So I should say, it's a bottom-up approach. So the government didn't say, you should do this for Ireland. It came from the bottom up. It was developed without funding, and it is voluntary. So I don't want to go into all the detail of the plan, but I suppose just to say it's got 5 objectives. But really the core one is this one in the centre here. It's about making Ireland pollinator friendly. So it's about looking at farmland. Are there changes we can make on farmland to make it more pollinator friendly? Can we make public land more pollinator friendly? And can we make private land more pollinator friendly? So that's the core of it. And then 42 of those 81 actions are focused around that. Then there's various other objectives. So there's, actions to raise awareness, to support beekeepers and growers, to do the right research, so we're answering the right questions and know we're doing the right thing. And then there are actions around tracking change and seeing if what we're doing is actually working. So I just wanted to say, I suppose, at this point, a few of the lessons that we've learned in terms of the way that we've developed the plan here in Ireland, what has worked and where there's room for improvement. And I think what has worked, firstly, the bottom-up approach has been really important for us because people are buying into it because they want to, so it's not seen as something that's being imposed. The public consultation, I think, was really important, and also openly responding to that consultation. Again, it's a voluntary plan, so it's totally non-threatening. It's all Ireland, so you might be aware of the politics in Ireland. So there's the Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland on the island, and really this is an all-Ireland plan, so which has been very positive for us. So we've got the 2 jurisdictions coming together to share knowledge and expertise. It's all about positive messaging. It's all solution-driven. There's no blame, and that's been an important part of it for us. Again, clearly trying to communicate what we want to achieve. We've always tried to make sure there's a strong sense that it's a shared plan of action. It's a call to action. We're all in this together. And again, there's no time pressure. Some organizations take a lot longer to get behind things than others, and then we're happy to, to go along with that within the pollinator plan here. In terms of room for improvement, it is definitely about bringing along humans. There's no doubt about that. I sometimes think if we were to ask this bee on the cover of the plan what it thinks of it, it might be saying, is this the best that you can do? So there's certainly an element of that. It's the first building block in solving the problem. It's not the be all and end all. It's putting in place the core building block to address this going forward. And then I suppose there's always the issue, particularly when we've seen how much support the plan has got, should we have gone in a little bit harder initially, but it's easy to say that now. So just to tell you a very small bit about how how the management of it works. So as I was saying, we've got a 16-member steering group that is voluntary, so they all take part entirely voluntarily. We meet twice a year and have more regular email contact. I coordinate the project, so I spend about 2 days a week within my existing role. So I'm a senior ecologist here in the National Biodiversity Data Centre. So about 2 days a week I devote to the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And then we've got one project officer, which is run as a job share. So that is it. Just again, I'll say a small bit about funding before then and talk a bit more about the plan itself. But really, it was developed and published entirely without funding a lot of people said we were mad, but sometimes you have to just go ahead and see if something's going to work. So it was developed without funding. Since then, we've had funding each year for that project officer position. And then the Department of Agriculture in the Republic of Ireland give us a very small budget to develop resources, which is €15,000 a year, which I think is about 22,000 Canadian dollars. And again, there is no project budget beyond that. So the way it operates, I suppose, is that there are now 90 plus partners, more and more signing up all the time, and they fund their own actions. Others have funded particular elements for us, for example, print runs of some of the resources or other dedicated activities. And I'll say more about that, as we go along. So that's kind of the background to it. Just, I suppose, to tell you a small bit about what I think we've learned in terms of the way that we've managed it here, the things that have worked. I think what's worked is that the oversight or the management is by people that have a background in pollination ecology. So that's largely myself and a colleague, Professor James Stout, who is based in Trinity College Dublin. So Jane and I, came up with the idea originally, and then we've led it through and worked with the steering group. And I think we've both got a background in pollination ecology, and that's been really important because you know what you're trying to do, and you don't have to keep going out for external expertise all the time. We've got a really active multi-sectoral steering group, which they're fantastic, and that's been really important. Again, the implementation is coordinated by the National Biodiversity Data Centre, so we're not an official body, it's not direct government, we've got no special interests, so there's been a huge strength in that. Also, that gives us the freedom to communicate purely on the basis of an unbiased evidence base. We're not under any pressure. We communicate on the basis of what the science is telling us we should be doing for bees, and it's great to have the freedom to do that. And I think that's not always the case. Again, the management is directly linked to data and monitoring. So the fact that it's coordinated by the National Biodiversity Data Centre, and we also track what's happening with bees and with other pollinators, there's a strength in that. It's voluntary, which makes the management a wee bit easier. Again, the lack of funding has definitely promoted efficiencies. And we try to be fully transparent, and particularly in terms of managing expectation around it. Room for improvement. I suppose the lack of resources means we can't fully capitalise on the interest. So we could do a lot more if we had more funding. There's that level of interest in Ireland in pollinators at the minute. It's currently trendy, and I suppose it's something that I'm very conscious of, that we need to transition that into real societal change. And also, I think we could share better, both at the EU and at the global level. So I'm really thrilled to be able to speak to you today, and I hope it's the start of future collaborations, because I know that we've got a huge amount that we can learn from Bee City Canada and other initiatives that you have. I would say, before I say any more, there are obviously factors that make it easier in Ireland. It's a small island. We don't have a large pollinator-dependent agricultural sector, and we don't have very many special interest groups, so we don't have territorial issues to deal with particularly. I was trying to compare ourselves with you, and I was looking up, so I mean, it's mind-blowing to us, but the area of Canada is about 100 times the size of that of Ireland, and you have about 8 times more native bees and 8 times the population. So obviously it's a different situation, but that's it. I think, there are still things that hopefully we can learn from each other. So back into how we're approaching this whole thing. So we developed a plan. What happened then was we moved into the implementation phase. And really what we've been focusing on there is identifying evidence-based actions to help communicating those properly, and then bringing as many people together to work under a partnership approach as possible. So one thing that we certainly learned and that we try to stick to is that the messaging is positive and constructive and celebrates the biodiversity, the pollinators that we have. So that's a big part of it. Really, and I suppose it's about connecting and caring. If people don't care about something, they're not very responsive then to taking personal actions to try and address whatever problem it is. So that's a big part of it. We've also tried to be really clear on what we're asking people to do. And I suppose the core message within the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, much like what you're doing, It's about thinking about sites, whether that's a school, a local area, a farm, a business, a garden, you know, church grounds, golf course, whatever it happens to be. It's about thinking about that site that you have some responsibility for managing, and how can you provide food, shelter, and safety for pollinators there. So I suppose our core message is around whatever your site is, how can you provide food, shelter, and safety? What we've also found, and again, this really is the core part of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, I think, is that all the solutions that we're proposing are evidence-based, and then we try to carefully tailor those to the target audience. So what we've been doing is publishing these evidence-based guidelines. So really we're saying, you know, it's all about food, shelter, and safety, and then we publish evidence-based guidelines explaining exactly how you would go about providing that. And so we've tailored these to different sectors. So the first one we published was a junior version of the All Ireland Pollinator Plan itself. So that was the plan, but just written for children. And I think we felt really strongly that that was the first thing that we should do, is just communicate the plan to the next generation properly. So it's the exact same information, but it's just written for children. So that explains the kind of things that they can do in their school. We've published guidelines for what you can do on the farm, for what councils or local authorities can do, local communities. There's a huge local community sector in Ireland, and I don't know if it's the same actually in other countries or if it happens in Canada, but I'll say more about that in a bit. We've got one for businesses, gardens, faith communities. Thing about these is they're all evidence-based. The relevant sector feeds into the development each time, and we try to tailor the communication. So often, even though the actions that they can take are quite similar, they're carefully tailored to the respective audience. So, you know, the one for councils isn't written in the same way as the one for gardens, for example. And then they're all branded. And there are more in preparation. You can see all these on the website if you're interested at pollinators.ie. They're all freely available to download from there. This just shows you, this is one for local communities. So in each one of the guideline documents, there's lots of evidence-based actions. So loads of options. I think there's around 30 different actions that you could take within each one. And again, we wanted that flexibility to be there. You know, one garden isn't like another garden, same way that one business isn't like another business, or one local community isn't like another. So the idea with these was to provide loads of different options for things that you could do that would really help, in the hope that even if you just did one, well, that would be better than nothing. And again, all the actions are very pragmatic and low cost. We've got a separate series which provides additional information on some of the more complex actions, and those are developed in partnership with relevant organisations. So there's various ones there at the minute, you know, how to create wild pollinator nest and habitat, how to create and manage a wildflower meadow, for example, how to develop a pollinator plan for your school. So, you know, those are, again, all available on the website, and we developed these with partner organisations. Just launched a new series of pollinator-friendly management of certain sites. So I suppose there's quite specific sites that we felt would really benefit from their own guideline documents. So we've just launched this new series, and the one for golf courses is going to be released in the next week or so. And again, I think, you know, as time goes on, there'll be more and more of these as we identify more sectors who could help. There's no stone being left unturned with the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. No one is escaping helping. So the other thing, I suppose, what we wanted to make sure to achieve was that the information is really easily accessible, so that it's free and we communicate it using appropriate channels. The core one is obviously the website, so pollinators.ie. We also use videos, got an animation, you know, lots and lots of different approaches just to try and get the message across to people. And again, I think, you know, using those different mediums is really important. And again, making it freely available has been really important for us. So you can see on the website, they're all in there. You know, signage templates, flyers, everything. What we were trying to do, I think, was to provide a sort of free standalone toolkit for anyone who wants to help. So again, you know, you can just go back to it. You can go into the website, you know, if it's a farm, you click on farmland, and then everything that you would need to make your farm more pollinator friendly is hopefully accessible from there, and the same for all the other different sectors. I think what we've learned as well is that the process has to be actively managed. And I think it's important to be open and transparent about that. So, and I think the reason for that is that, you know, when you have conservation initiative, it's important that people know it's active and that they're in it together. So the idea with this is that you know something's happening, you know other people are also doing something, it's not just you, and that together, you know, you can make a difference. So we do try hard to make sure that it feels like an active initiative at all times, as I'm sure you do and other organisations. So, you know, we've got mailing lists and we use social media and we try to regularly update on progress and things like that. But you can see all this on the website if you're interested. And really, I suppose working together is the bedrock of it. It is a call to action to everyone, you know, so we've identified what everyone can do to help. And what we then try to do is to use existing networks or partnerships to encourage the implementation. So there's no point, you know, reinventing the wheel. So with each of these, when we know what we're asking the sector to do, we try to use existing networks that are already there to communicate the message. So for example, with the school pollinator plan, there's already a Green Schools initiative in the Republic of Ireland and an Eco Schools initiative in Northern Ireland. So we collaborate with those initiatives to get the information out on pollinators. And then it's the same across the board. So we're using existing initiatives rather than inventing anything new. So I suppose, you know, really it's about coming together to create networks of pollinator-friendly habitat. And obviously this is exactly what you're doing in Bee City, Canada. So it's about, you know, asking local authorities or councils to play their part and to take small actions, schools, gardens, residents associations, businesses, religious properties, and then local community groups. And I suppose the idea is if we can make our urban centres, you know, big and small, more pollinator friendly, and if we can tackle our transport networks, so road, rail, walkways, greenways, canals, all that, if we can address those and make those more pollinator friendly, and then if we can tackle farmland and try to make farmland a bit more pollinator friendly, well, you're opening up the whole landscape so that bees can start to use it again. And the idea is to create an island, you know, where pollinators can survive and thrive. So just I suppose say a little bit about the lessons that we've learned in that approach to implementation that we've taken. What has worked? The tailored evidence-based actions have just been so important here. And I suppose when we started this, there was a temptation to just produce one guideline document with actions that would help pollinators, and each sector would pick it up and interpret it themselves. And I'm so glad now that we didn't go down that route, because having the tailored evidence-based actions, you know, for different sectors has made all the difference. You know, so the one for councils, when they pick it up, it's written for them, it's in their language, it makes sense to them, and they're much more likely to do it. So that, I can't stress how important that's been for us, even though it has been more work, and obviously there's repetition across them. Again, the positivity has been important, and focusing on actions that, you know, that are easy to do. Continually emphasizing the partnership-driven approach has been really important. The strong branding, you know, again, is important just to build this project that gains national recognition, and then, you know, that helps drive it on further. We let the thing evolve as opportunities arise, and there's been, you know, loads of unexpected synergies and things. And, you know, once an opportunity arises, well, then we kind of leap on it, really. And so, you know, we've kept that flexibility. We try to transparently track progress. So if it's working, we'll say it's working, and if it's not working, we'll equally face up to that. And again, we try to provide a recognition system for people who are helping. The room for improvement. Really, we just can't keep up with the demand for the sectoral guidelines. So, you know, that has been an issue. Some sectors are still waiting to be developed, you know, 2-3 years later. So at the minute, for example, we're just working with the transport authorities to develop guidelines for road networks, rail networks, and so on. So, you know, because there's been so much interest, and because we try to do each one and tailor it to the sector, it takes time. So there are some that are still waiting to be progressed. And it has, you know, as is inevitable, it has, the plan has spawned some other activities, not all of which are helpful to the core aims. In terms of the communication and awareness raising, what's worked? What's worked for us is communicating a really clean and simple message. And I guess, that's the same for Bee City Canada. So it's the food, shelter and safety message. And we do focus on bees. So with our communications, so the All Ireland Pollinator Plan is geared towards protecting bees and hoverflies particularly, because we feel they're the most important pollinators in Ireland. But we do focus the communications around bees because it's a very clean message that you can easily get across to people. We use as many mechanisms to communicate as possible. We do rely on the 90 plus partners who have their own communication channels to get out messaging on our behalf. And again, we use other existing national networks where they exist. We've been encouraging champions within sectors, and these are people who really just take it and run with it and encourage and inspire people locally. And again, I suppose I didn't see this happen to the extent that it has, but those people have just been amazing. And there's suites of them out there within different sectors who've just taken it on board and are making it happen locally. So those local champions have been crucial. Try to reach out to new audiences. We've been trying to adopt a train the trainer approach where possible because we can't get out personally to everyone, so we try to train up other people to then go up and communicate on our behalf. And we've been using short videos, the short 3 or 5 minute video to communicate to key sectors, and that's been really useful. And I suppose with those we use a peer-to-peer approach. So if it's for farmers, we try to ask a farmer to do it and to talk about it himself and say whatever he wants to say. That makes much more sense than someone like me, talking about farms. So I suppose that's what's worked. In terms of the room for improvement, we're not maximizing social media, I don't think, so that's something that we need to look at. We do tend to spend a bit too much time on audiences that are already a little bit receptive. So we've been trying to move away from that, particularly this year, to make sure that where we devote our resources, they are to audiences who are not as receptive, more difficult, and obviously it's harder to do that, but that's what we have to do. There's no point talking to the converted all the time. And again, because of the lack of resources, we do have to turn down a huge number of requests for talks or workshops, which is a real shame, so we're not maximizing potential. Just coming back to this, I suppose I'm going to say a wee bit about how we track progress. And I think that is crucial when you have a national plan, or actually any plan, that you're checking whether or not it's working. And I know in Ireland, this is something that we've fallen down on over the years, and that we've had huge initiatives, but we've not checked whether or not what they were supposed to achieve has happened or they're working. So I suppose because the All Ireland Pollinator Plan came from the ground up, we didn't have to do it. We were trying to do something that was really going to make a difference. That has been a crucial part of it. So tracking whether or not it's working has always been a very important part of it. So we do this in 3 ways. The first is to track progress in the short term. So that's in having the plan and having buy-in for that plan. So what we do there is we track implementation of the 81 actions in it. In the medium term, it's about returning food and shelter for pollinators to the Irish landscape. So again, we're trying to track that as it's going back in. And then in the long term, we're tracking changes in the pollinators themselves. We're tracking changes in the number of hive numbers over intermolasses for honeybees, tracking changes in the number of wild bees, wild hoverflies, and other insects. Obviously, the long term, that's where it's all about. It's not going to be a success unless we see healthier pollinator populations into the future. What the core work of the National Biodiversity Data Centre is tracking change in Ireland's wildlife. So that is, it's what we do here. So we have systems in place to track that. I'm not going to talk about that today. Just going to say a very small bit about these other 2 and how we do that. So in terms of tracking progress in the short term, so what's happening with the plan itself and its 81 actions. So we track implementation of those. The responsibility for the 81 actions is shared out between all the partners who signed up to it at the start. So there's 68 of them. And once a year, they have to report on what they've done against their own action. So in the plan, they agree to take responsibility for certain action. And then once a year, they have to report on what they've done against that action. And the report is made publicly available. So that has worked great because, we don't police the plan. This is the only way that we do police it. So we ask each of the partners once a year to report on what they've done. They're given 2 weeks to do that. And if they don't report back, it says that they've not reported back. So they all report back because they don't want to be seen to not. So this has been really positive. So at the end of year 3, which was just before Christmas, of the 81 actions, 92% were either completed or in train as agreed. So that side of things has been fantastic. So people really have bought into the plan and are doing what they agreed to do. Then in terms of tracking progress in the medium term, so we track the resources, the food and shelter going back into the landscape. And within the National Biodiversity Data Centre, we've developed a special online mapping system to track this. So it's called Actions for Pollinators. You can see it at pollinators.biodiversityireland.ie. So this is a system, publicly available GIS-based mapping system. So what it shows is all the different sites where someone is taking an action to help. You can search by the type, so you can see just what businesses are doing. You can see, just what's happening in gardens or schools or whatever. And you can also search by what action they're doing. So you can see cross sites, where there's reduced mowing, where there's pollinator-friendly planting, where there's reduced pesticide use, and so on. So yeah, and again on the system, you can see, the different actions that are being taken. What we're finding so far, as people are just really starting to use the system, is that the most popular action is pollinator-friendly planting, then raising awareness activities, and then reduce mowing, and then after that, protecting existing habitats and pesticide use and so on. So it's interesting to see, the different actions that are being taken up and those that are a bit less palatable to people. And what you can zoom in, so you can zoom into the map, and this was the idea, but we wanted this system firstly to provide recognition for people that are helping, and then also to show what was happening at local levels so that everyone could coordinate a bit better. So you can zoom into the map and see what's happening at local levels. So this is a village actually not that far from Dublin, and the red dots are where people have taken an action in their garden. The orange dot is what the school has done, and then these purple dots are what a local community group has done for pollinators. So it really helps to hopefully, as it's used more, it'll help to coordinate at local levels and show exactly what's happening. And once more and more people start using it, it'll help to identify where you could put in pollinator corridors to link things up better and all that. Within each of these dots, you can click on it and it'll show you the detail of what has happened there. So you can see, if you go to view detail, you can see this is a garden site, so it shows you what that person has done in the garden to help pollinators, and you can attach photographs. So again, it helps to share knowledge as well as everything else. Again, hopefully relatively easy to use. So if you want to use it, you can draw a polygon around your site. So again, it could be a farm, it could be a business site, it could be a school, it could be a garden, it could be local public land, whatever it happens to be. You draw a polygon around it, and you then, once you say what type of site you are, if you're a garden, a council, school, so on, you'll get options to fill in what you've done that correspond to the relevant guideline document. So we didn't want it to be free for all. We wanted to impose some sort of structure with behind the scenes on the system so that it's easier then to report on what's happening. So you then fill in what you're doing in accordance with the actions that we're recommending for that sector. In terms of track and change, I suppose what has worked in Ireland, the management of the plan, I think I said this before, the management of the plan by the Biodiversity Data Centre has been really important because you're linking track and change into the plan itself. There isn't that, middleman for that, and that's been really important. The annual report, where all the partners have to report on what they've done against their action, that's been, really positive in terms of perhaps making sure that everyone does what they've said they would do. The Actions for Pollinators mapping system, has been really good to just facilitate recognition for people that are helping, and as I say, to help coordinate at local levels. And we've got a really successful citizen science bumblebee monitoring scheme, which is tracking exactly what's happening with our wild pollinators across the landscape. Room for improvement. Again, uptake of the actions for pollinator system is quite slow, so it's at the minute it's only capturing a fraction of the actual actions taking place. So that's something that we need to address going forward. You know, some people are happy to do an action, but they just don't want to be bothered putting it into an online system. So we do need to look at that. Again, you know, there's issues, I suppose, that are specific to Ireland then in terms of collecting other data on pollinators that we need to address here. I suppose what I wanted to talk about just for the rest of this, and I don't have that many more slides, but just talk about how we've been making that action happen. So, and again, I'm sure there's lots of parallels with what you're doing in BCity Canada or BCity USA. So, say what we're trying to do is to tackle the whole landscape in Ireland to try to make changes on farmland, public land, and private land. So I'm just going to say a wee bit about what we've been doing in each of those. So I'll start with private land. So really for private land here, that is gardens, it's faith communities, and it's businesses. So I'll start with gardens, and I suppose to say, because we don't have much resources in the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, really we've never prioritised gardens. So we made the information available to people, and it's up to them then whether they do it or not. So I suppose what we're finding is there's huge interest with the public, particularly at the minute, in that they want to do something to help. So there is massive scope within this sector. And certainly if we had, you know, dedicated funding, there's a huge amount that could be done, you know, by engaging directly with the public through the gardens or through the garden centre sector. And actually there was a national poll in Ireland, you know, a nationally representative poll that happened last September, and independently of the pollinator plan actually, but what it showed was that already 38% of people have made their garden more pollinator friendly. You know, so that's already huge. And I guess, you know, if we had the resources, we could do a huge amount more with that sector, both in urban areas and also in rural. Faith communities, again, you know, I said we've been trying to just take advantage, I suppose, of unexpected synergies. So with faith communities, what we find is there's a huge amount of interest with faith communities across denominations, and these guidelines are you know, multi-denominational. And so we found a huge interest within this sector, and particularly within the Roman Catholic Church, as it does provide a mechanism to implement the papal encyclical Laudato Si, if you've not seen it, which is on care of our common home. So this provides, I suppose, a sort of like a practical toolkit for parishes who want to do something to implement this. So again, it's something that perhaps we didn't see when we started, but you know, a sector that really has shown a huge amount of interest and started taking real action on the ground. Then businesses, and again, I've no doubt that you could teach me a lot more on this sector than I could say to you. But for businesses, this is one where we've experienced really unexpected levels of interest in Ireland. What's worked is we've got a range of clearly explained actions that businesses can take. You know, we've created a national structure for them. We've tried to link what they're doing into their corporate social responsibility. We profile positive actions, you know, provide them with cost benefit analyses, things like that. How businesses works actually is we've got the guidelines. There's lots of actions that a business of whatever size can take in their outdoor space. If they don't have outdoor space, there's still actions, and they can fund things locally. So it might be a print run of the junior All Ireland Pollinator Plan to local schools, or it might be providing funding to a local community group. So lots of actions they can take. We established a framework for businesses. So when they sign up as a business supporter, they agree to take one action in the first year and at least another two within the following 5 years. And then they also agree to provide an update on what they're doing once a year, and that update again is made publicly available. So currently there's 125 companies that have become business supporters, and really what we're seeing now is that there's, you know, more and more signing up each week. So really that's taken off at the minute here. And the types of companies, you know, we've been surprised at the range and diversity of companies who engaged with this, and some of them I never thought that they would want to be involved in the biodiversity initiative, but you know, when you provide a structure and they understand why and what it is you're asking them to do, they really have. So, you know, it's right from agri-businesses to supermarket chains, property developers, small local companies, you know, a whole range of different businesses. And if you're interested, you can go onto the website and see the list of businesses that we do have. And you can also see the annual report from last year. So you can see the kinds of actions that those businesses are taking. Just to say a little bit about the trying to make action on public land. So again, for us in Ireland, that is councils, so local authority managed land. It's local communities who manage land, both in cities and in towns and villages. It's schools, and then it's transport corridors. So just with schools, really what we find, again, mainly through lack of resources, within the Pollinator Plan team, is that we provide the resources. So there's a junior All-Ireland Pollinator Plan. There's also a how-to guide on how to develop a school pollinator plan. So between those two, we find that when you have the resources, they sort of distribute themselves, and schools are taking them on board and going ahead and doing action. And so I suppose largely that one happens on its own. Transport corridors, that is in preparation at the minute. So again, that's one that we would hope to push through the rest of 2019 and into 2020. I'm going to say a bit about councils or local authorities. So what we find is that they have really embraced the plan, and they are taking actions on public land. So, and I suppose the key actions really that they seem to be addressing are around mowing of grass. So they're willing to, there's a lot of grass that's very, very tightly mown in Ireland, and what we're trying to do is get them to move away from that to let the grass grow and the wildflowers grow in amongst it. So they have been quite receptive, to allowing more natural meadows on public land, in small spaces and in large. They've really embraced pollinator-friendly planting and also reducing pesticide use. So what we've done actually just more recently is establish, again, a framework for councils or local authorities. And what we were finding was, since we launched the plan in late 2015, most local authorities across the island, and there's 40 different ones across Ireland, 41, most of them were taking action, but we just couldn't get a handle on what it is that they were doing. So what we decided to do was to introduce a more formalized framework. So just in February past, we introduced this council framework. So now what they do is they sign up as a partner of the Pollinator Plan. And in doing that, they agree to take a certain number of actions, and they also agree to report back on what it is they do once a year. So that allows us to better provide recognition for what they're doing, and also it allows much better knowledge exchange, because some councils are doing amazing stuff in one area, and others are doing it in the other. So it's about sharing that knowledge between them. So this new framework helps us do that much better. So really, as I say, they formally sign up now. They agree to support the ethos. They agree to take one action in the first year and at least 3 more within the following 5 years. And they agree then to update us on what they've done. So what has worked here is definitely having that formalized framework. Really has worked. And I know that you do that across the board, I think. Training, we try to provide training for council staff, right from the engineers to the planners to the gardening staff. Lots of case studies and trying to profile positive things. Having the national initiative definitely helps communicate better and helps them to explain why they might be changing things. We've got a common signage template, which has been really important. So this has been used right across the island by all sorts of sectors, so everyone knows what it is now. And I suppose it has that kind of recognition that it's part of something national, that we're all trying to do something together to help pollinators. Provided cost-benefit analyses for this sector when we were trying to get them to shift their management. And again, the timing's been good. There's a general move towards sustainability in Ireland, so that certainly has helped. The challenges with this sector, progress is a wee bit slow. There is a bit of a reluctance to change in certain areas, and part of that is that sometimes they just need to make changes to machinery, so it's not always easy, particularly if they're going to change their mowing regimes. And what we find is that sometimes councils agree, but for some actions they're using external contractors to do the work, and then communicating that through to that level can be difficult. And also, the public who disagree with the less tidy management tend to be very vocal. So again, that's a challenge, just counteracting that. I think, someone who doesn't like the less tidy look they're the very people who might ring up and complain, whereas, probably lots more people loved it, but just didn't think of ringing the council to say it was good. So that's also an issue. Just, I suppose, to come towards finishing up, but the other element of public land are local communities. And as I said, I don't know if this happens in other countries, but it is a huge sector in Ireland. And really, we have found that this sector has just been vital in normalising, a more sustainable and less tidy way of managing the landscape. So what we've done here is piggyback on existing networks. So there's a local community network in Ireland called Tidy Towns. So there's over 800 different Tidy Towns groups around the country. So they're based in towns or villages right across the Republic of Ireland. And they're on the go for about 60 years. And the clues in the name, they started out as a way of having tidy local areas. So it was all about, making things really neat and tidy. And in more recent years, and full credit to them, they've been willing to, look at moving away from that slightly and also making local areas more sustainable and in this case, more pollinator friendly. So what we did is Tidy Towns, it's competition, very, very competitive. So there is a Tidy Towns champion in Ireland each year for the, tidiest or most attractive town or village. And what we've done is introduce a special pollinator award into that competition. So now you still have the main Tidy Towns award, but you also have a pollinator award. So that has been just fantastic because everyone loves a competition, I think. So these are some of the winners over the last few years. And, it's just been fantastic. Tidy Towns traditionally made local areas tidy. And really, we've been totally inspired by what they've done now in terms of also making them pollinator friendly. So this sector really has been hugely important for us in Ireland. And at this stage, over 140 different towns and villages have taken significant action to make their local area more pollinator friendly. And I don't think I could ever describe this, but we did make a little video with one of the towns that won it in 2017. So you can watch this if you're interested. And it's just them talking about what they did in their local village and why they did it. And, it really does explain, how this has been working. We also have various other short videos on the pollinator plan, plus a little animation. So if anyone's interested, you can watch those at any time. Last slide, I promised. I'm not going to say very much about this. Farmland. This is obviously the most important sector for us and also the most challenging. Most of Ireland is farmland, so we have to make changes to the way farmland is managed to make it more pollinator friendly if we want the pollinator plan to be a success. So, I guess much like other countries in Ireland, we had low intensity agriculture for a long time that was very pollinator friendly. We've now moved to intensive agriculture and it's not pollinator friendly. So the challenge is, how to start making small changes to allow pollinators to exist back in this more intensive farmed landscape. So again, we released these farmland guidelines. This one just has 5 simple actions for farmers, developed in consultation with farmers and farming organisations. And the challenge now then is to roll that out and actually get changes made on farmland. So we are excited. We're about to start a new 5-year project. We're going to work with 40 farmers across different farming types and intensity levels. And the thing is, all farms can become more pollinator friendly without impacting on the farmer's productivity. So the challenge is just identifying mechanisms to make that happen. So we want to identify, a farm scale pollinator score or an index so a farmer knows how pollinator friendly their farm is to start, and then what changes they could make to improve that score. So that's where we want to go next, was to say, obviously this is for us the most important sector and certainly the most challenging one. But that's, hopefully over the coming years we'll be able to make progress there. So I will stop talking. You'll be glad to know. I just want to say thank you again. I'm really thrilled to be able to chat with you about the pollinator plan. As I said, we're really excited about what we can learn from your work. Thanks.
Well, thank you so much. And I think I only have one word, and that's brilliant. This is a brilliant, what I can see, like a concept and your how you're managing it and the site. I think this is hugely successful. I'm super impressed, and I'd certainly love to hear the comments from everybody who's here. I know we have Phyllis, actually, Phyllis Stiles, who was the founder of Bee City USA, how Bee City Canada came to be, and don't know if she'd like to unmute and maybe say something.
Hi, Shelley, and hi, Una. What a presentation. It's so inspiring, and my mind is just racing. I've been taking notes as quickly as I could, trying to see, you know, what ideas that we might borrow from you all to improve what we're doing at Bee City USA. It is incredibly inspiring. Thank you for everything you've done.
Oh, thank you, Phyllis. And I should say that we've been inspired by Bee City USA for a long time. And I hope that at some stage we'll get a chance to meet, because I know that we had a few American visitors last summer, and we were delighted to meet with them. And I hope that maybe in the future we can, you know, exchange advice.
Well, that's kind of funny because we're planning a little week-long vacation to Ireland in September.
Oh, fantastic.
So I'll get in touch with you.
Do that. It would be lovely to meet in person. It really would.
Agreed.
So let's see if there's, so if anyone would like to unmute themselves and ask some questions, please feel free to do that. Or if you'd like to type in your questions, you're more than welcome to do that as well.
Could I ask a question? You know, Una, it was so impressive that you've been able to do all of this by a lot of partnerships and a lot of hard work on your part and your co-coordinator's part, I imagine. And it's part of your day job, so to speak. We started just with me as a volunteer, as Shelley as a volunteer, and now, of course, we merged with the Xerces Society, and now I'm on the staff of the Xerces Society, which is absolutely fantastic. But we do charge an application fee for our Bee City and Bee Campus affiliates. So in all of those arrangements that you have with partners and businesses and schools and faith communities and villages, is there, in businesses, I think I mentioned businesses, are there any fees involved, or is it all just strictly free?
It's all just strictly free at the minute. Yeah, because I was really interested to see your model, and I know that you charge, and in some ways that makes perfect sense, because, you know, it helps to fund the initiative. But no, so the All Ireland Pollinator Plan, there are no fees whatsoever involved.
Well, thank you again. It's amazing.
Thanks.
Yeah, I think I actually, I really do like all those different sectors and the call to action. And so would you say that it's a lot of work for people on their renewal every year? To do they just tick something off, or do they have to list what they planted or anything, or is it pretty simple?
No, it's very simple. So I suppose it depends on the sector. So with councils and with businesses, they just report back to us on what they've done, but it's a simple paragraph outline, and, you know, they provide as much detail as they want. And then we have the mapping system where people can go in and update each year if, you know, if they've taken additional actions. But yeah, no, we don't place huge burden on people on that side of things. So yeah, no, it's quite easy, you know, to just update us on what you've done.
So yeah, this is what I really like about it, and I'd like to see. We actually have some of our board members here on the conversation today, and I'd certainly like to implement a lot of really what you're doing to see how we could incorporate that, because I think it really is important. So basically, anyone can just go on the website and sign up. Right? If I'm a house, I can do that, or if I'm a church or a business, anyone can do it at any time, and they don't need to contact you. It's very simple to do. I think that's really the brilliant. For me, it seems to be extremely brilliant, making it simple.
Yeah, that's it exactly. I suppose we provide the guideline documents so they can look at those and see what to do, and then they can just go ahead straight away and start doing things themselves, and then, you know, let us know what they've done. So yeah.
So I do have a question about the plant, because I didn't really, actually, I haven't looked specifically what your action plans are, but I imagine it's more maybe native plants or plants without pesticides or that they're purchasing. And so here in Canada, actually just in Toronto, it's very difficult to find these plants, the native plant nurseries. So in fact, what we're trying to do is create a database of all the native plant nurseries that are in Canada, because most people don't know where to go. They'll go to their local shopping center or their supermarket and pick up plants, but without realizing that they're laced with a lot of pesticides.
Yeah, it's a similar issue. It's a similar issue here, perhaps not to the same extent, but yeah. So I mean, yeah, it's the exact same thing that we're doing here. So I suppose what we're trying to do is get people to encourage more native plants. For us, often that's just about changing the management of sites. You know, there's an awful lot of grass that's really tightly mown in Ireland, whereas, you know, the seeds are still in the seed bank if you just let those wildflowers grow. So what we find often is that people can, you know, go back to species-rich meadows just by changing their mowing regime. So there's an element of that, of just getting people to manage things in a different way. I don't know if it's the same in Canada, but, you know, in Ireland there's a bit of an obsession with tidying up the landscape. You know, so is that grass cutting, or it's we have a lot of, you know, native flowering hedgerows on farms or on public land, and they get cut into sort of like a box shape. So the shrubs and the trees, they don't get a chance to flower. So again, just simple actions like moving away from that annually cutting into this really neat and tidy box shape, into letting those shrubs and trees in hedgerows flower in spring to provide food for pollinators. You know, that doesn't cost anything. It's just a different way of managing the landscape than we've become used to. So I suppose we do focus on that, on those kind of actions of just moving away from that obsession with tidying up our natural landscape. You know, so there's that. Then separately, there is, particularly in gardens and on public land, there's the, you know, the pollinator-friendly planting, where you can buy perennials that are particularly rich in pollinator nectar. Again, that's something obviously we try to encourage, and there are issues then there with, you know, buying stock that's pesticide free. But I don't think we have the same issues as other countries might.
Right. Well, thanks for that answer. That's very helpful. So, are you finding has there been an increase in demand for the plants? Have you found as
Yeah.
that across? Yeah.
Yeah. So certainly, you know, the Irish suppliers of those plants are reporting huge increases in demand for them. So, you know, and that's really positive, and it's nice to be able to keep those sort of industries in Ireland where we can. So yeah, no, the demand, you know, has grown hugely.
Yeah. So let me just read a question. So Susan Blaney has a question. She says, and you talked about champions. Well, there's quite a few champions right here right now, and Susan Blaney is one of them. So she says, what an incredible roadmap for what is possible. In Ontario, I think we have fragmented parts of this strategy already, but we need an overarching institution like this Biodiversity Center to take over and put it all together. Like what has happened to the Ontario Pollinator Health Action Plan. And what she was referring to was what our last government had put in place. But, you know, with the new government and, you know, things change with just a stroke of a pen. And so that's really what we're faced with. But I don't know, if you have a comment.
Yeah, just to say, you know, in some ways we're very fortunate that we do have a centre like the Biodiversity Data Centre here, because it's ideally placed to do this. And sometimes if you don't have an organisation like that, it's much more difficult to do something. I think we should set up a wing in Ontario. Yeah. We could have a...
Yes, definitely.
But I'd love that, yeah. Yeah, that is, I can't stress enough the importance of having an overarching framework. So, and I mean, it sounds obvious, and of course it's obvious, but you know, the challenge then is who manages it, and you do need someone to actively manage it. But that's certainly the key. So, and it's just about making sure everyone's working together and everyone knows they're part of something bigger, and you're all working towards the same goal. And that's, you know, that's what's important. And you know, it's undoubtedly easier. It's a small island. Ireland is a small island, so of course it's easier for us. But you know, perhaps, you know, it is something that, you know, that could be done in regional areas elsewhere.
Yeah, I just think, you know, social media and websites, I mean, it's perfect for it, what you're offering to everybody to sign in. And could you talk a little bit about the signs too?
Yeah.
How people have to order them, or how does that work?
Yeah, so again, they've been really important. So we have a common signage template. So, and all it says on it is managed for wildlife. And there's a picture of the logo. So you can go onto the website and download the template. So you download the template and you can add your own logo to that. So if you're a business or a local group or a council or a local authority, whatever, you can add your own logo to the template and then you have that printed up yourself. And then you can put those up wherever you want. So, and that has been really important. And I drive across Ireland now, and there's signs everywhere, which is lovely to see. But and again, the fact that there's the template and they're all the same, it kind of helps things along because there's this common brand, and then everyone knows what it is that's happening. And particularly where it's actions that the public might not fully appreciate. So where it looks a little bit less tidy than it was if pesticides have been reduced, or if the grass is growing longer than it used to be, having a sign there so that they know it's deliberate, and then having a sign that they can recognize right across the country has been really important. So, but yeah, no, we just provide the templates, and organizations, whoever wants, can download it, add their logo, and put it up.
Yes, so just so I understand, so basically you work 2 days a week.
On this, yeah.
Right, and something else. And then you have sort of 2 part-time people that are maybe paid
Yeah.
a little bit, and
Yeah.
and then that's pretty much it. That's what manages. So the
Yeah.
work involved was writing up obviously all those booklets and.
Yeah, and I suppose that's where there was an advantage that I have a background in.
My apologies. Sorry.
So my own background is in pollination ecology, and Professor Jane Stout in Trinity was the same. So we were able to, do those booklets largely ourselves, and then just consult with the sector each time to make sure they made sense on the ground. So I guess that it did make it a lot easier because we had that expertise in-house, I guess.
Right. Okay. So there was. Let me just. There was some other questions here. Oh wait, sorry about that. Where I've lost the screen. Someone wants to unmute and ask your questions. Please do that. Let's see. How do I find it? Maybe it's here. Nope. Okay. Nobody wants to unmute. Okay. What else I can ask? I know there were some other questions here.
This is Phyllis again. While Shelley's trying to find those questions, maybe I'll ask a question. So, Una, how concerned are you about the signs being posted, perhaps on sites where maybe they're doing something you actually don't want them to do?
Yeah, I suppose I was more concerned about that when we decided to release the template for people to freely download and use. So now, as having seen it in action, it actually happens relatively rarely. So you do occasionally drive along and you see it in an area where it's not remotely pollinator friendly. So that does happen very occasionally, but in general, not. And I think part of that is because we've had such uptake at that local community level that I mentioned. So we have this Tidy Towns network, and they've really taken on board the pollinator plan. So if there's a sign in a place that's not pollinator friendly, they are kind of policing that locally themselves. And also social media is great. So sometimes, someone will put up a picture of one of our signs in an area where it shouldn't be. And, that's posted on social media, and it's kind of dealt with that way. So it's not a huge, but of course it happens the odd time, but it hasn't been a huge problem.
That's great to hear. I mean, that's kind of been our philosophy as well, that, the upside is much better than the risk. And at least people might go to the website and try to learn more, and they'll learn on the website what it's intended to indicate, even if it might not be happening at that particular site.
Yeah, exactly. And the signs have the website address on. So yeah, that's exactly. We would hope that people would be curious enough to go along and look at the website after, and then, find out more themselves. But yeah, I always think it's better just to, to try to get people to do something, and obviously if it became an issue, then we would have to address it. But for the minute, it really hasn't been.
Yeah, that's great to hear.
I think there was a question about pesticide use. I'm just sort of remembering if that's decreased, you find? I mean, it seems that some people have decreased. Have you noticed anything, or is there some about that?
Yeah, we have actually noticed a decrease, and particularly within probably even the last 6 months. So what we're finding is that, I guess, with pesticides, they're used on farmland. So there haven't been huge changes there, I don't think. But they're also used quite extensively on public land by local authorities or councils. And what we're finding, particularly herbicides, and what we're finding is that there is definitely a reduction on that side of things. So local authorities or councils would have traditionally used quite a lot of herbicide just to tidy up, I guess in the past, you would have weeded and gone out and manually done it. And then, the use of herbicides became really prevalent. And what we're finding now is that there's huge pressure from the public that they don't want to see that anymore. So they want councils managing public land to make changes and to not use pesticides so freely. So we're finding huge reduction in that sector, and some councils have actually, taken the full step of banning the use of pesticides on public land that they're responsible for. And I think that is probably the way that things are going here. So we'll get much, much less use on the public land, and on private land, for example, in gardens. Again, there seems to be a reduction there where people are just realizing, that that's not what I want anymore. So certainly there is definitely a reduction of farmland. Is a more difficult, is a different issue.
Right. Thank you. I also have a question about invasive species and about spraying, because I think it's something that people are maybe not aware of how much money actually is spent from municipalities and from for us provinces and maybe the country as well. And I know many of these sort of invasives, they provide food for pollinators, maybe some habitat as well, things that we not be aware of. But there seems to be a war on plants, on quite a few plants. And I just wondered what your thoughts were and what's going on in Ireland about this.
Yeah, so I 2 days a week on this, and the other 3 days a week I work on plants actually. So I manage the plant data in the Biodiversity Centre. So I'm very fond of plants. Yeah, what we find is the exact same issue. So there's a huge problem with invasive species in Ireland. And really, we have another active work stream within the Biodiversity Centre, and I've got a colleague who works exclusively on invasive species in Ireland. And it is an issue. And some of them have been deliberately planted for pollinators by beekeepers. There's those kinds of issues. But I suppose within Ireland, what we're trying to do is to tackle invasive species. It's a massive issue for biodiversity generally. So actually, we do still advocate the use of herbicides on the very problematic invasives as a way of controlling them. So I guess it's a bit of a balance. I would say, when I'm asked this within the pollinator plan, the first priority has to be to control the invasive species because of the huge detrimental effect that they're having to biodiversity generally here. So we do have some invasives that are a massive problem, and it's a balancing act between the two, but we do still advocate the use at the minute of herbicides for the treatment of the more aggressive ones. And all the time there's more and more technologies coming on board here as alternatives to pesticides. And again, some that look like they might be promising for treating invasive species in the future. So obviously, when there's the evidence base for those, then we'll move away from pesticides entirely, hopefully. But yeah, no, it is a balancing act, and invasive species it is a big problem in Ireland.
Thank you. So as I said, I can't find the little chat, what people do. So if you don't mind unmuting and just asking.
Yeah.
If there's anybody who'd like to do that. See if anyone Anyone would like to ask any more questions? Well, I'm just so grateful for the presentation and what you're doing, and I think you can see it's very successful. I mean, you must be very pleased with what's happening.
Yeah. I suppose we've been overwhelmed by the amount of interest, and it just keeps growing. So it's almost like I'm going to wake up some morning and it's all gone or something. But yeah, no, it has been fantastic, and long may it last.
Yes. One question I have about farming. I attended a conference, a Living soil conference in Montreal, and about regenerative agriculture, and really thinking about healthy soil and soil structure and soil sponge, and I don't wonder if what's happening in Ireland, if there's an interest in soil health, and we're having a problem of organic matter in the soil is really decreased. So much of in farmland, the phosphorus is running into our lakes and getting into our water systems as well. So just seeing what's happening in Ireland.
It's exact same issues, really. So yeah, the same issues, and I think it's probably an emerging issue too. So we're not really fully aware of the extent that soil has been degraded here. So certainly, there's a huge amount of fertilizer use, and you get runoff into water systems. So the same issue. We've got a really grass-based agricultural system. Very intensive ryegrass, for dairy and cattle. So very little diversity in that, and very high levels of fertilizer application. So yeah, it's an issue I think that there's an awareness of, and one that there's going to be more and more awareness of in the future. So I think we have to make changes in agriculture if we want to protect biodiversity, and I think it'll happen slowly, but it's certainly going in the right direction.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, it seemed like regenerative agriculture certainly holds a lot of promise when you talk, all these animals moving every day, and that's like a herd, and the biodiversity that's coming, and just the way you shared about the seeds that they're in the soil, and they hadn't seen certain grass types in 20 years.
Yeah.
Based on this practice. Excuse me. And of course, there's no inputs needed. So are people telling you that they're actually spending less money now?
Yeah, exactly. So that is what's happening when you just move back, and it's the way that it used to be in the past. There's so much that was good in the past that we can learn from. So it is, and then also actually just in public land and in people's gardens, they say, well, I stopped mowing the lawn so often, and these amazing plants have come up that I had no idea, were still in the soil bank. Orchids and all sorts. So yeah, it is that. It's just it's about looking to the past and seeing what was good, and adopting that in a modern intensive setting. So yeah, huge challenges, but there's nothing that can't be addressed, I don't think.
I agree. When we work together, just like you said.
Absolutely.
Okay, Kelly, I just found the chat box if you want me to read the last comment.
Thank you.
From Julianne Labreche, she says, what an impressive presentation, so inspiring. Did Mary Reynolds have a big impact in Ireland with her interest in wild spaces after winning at the Chelsea Flower Show? She was Irish and only in her 20s, just curious.
Not within the public, to be honest. So yeah, very little public awareness of that. But it's absolutely fantastic, and I hope it grows. But yeah, actually, funnily enough, not huge amount of knowledge with the public.
Okay, that's the last comment. The other three above that, I think, have already been covered.
Thank you, Phyllis. You always have my back. Okay, so again, I'd like to thank you so much, Una, for coming and sharing what you're doing, and maybe we can continue the conversation, and I'll get together with the board and see what we can do, because I'm eager just to follow a lot what you're doing, because I think it's the right approach. Making changes quickly, because I think you've done it very fast.
Yeah, thanks. And thank you again for inviting me. So, you know, it's fantastic to make the connection, and I hope that we can stay in touch. And as I say, there's so much that we can learn from you, I've no doubt.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for
So,
joining us. And
thanks.
have a great day.
You too. Take care.
Bye.
I'll just unmute long enough to say goodbye, Shelley.
Oh, bye. I don't even know how to turn this off right now. But it's okay. Oh, well. Oh, maybe
Anyway.
I don't know.
Yes, that we must have a long conversation one of these days. Lot to talk about.
Let me just see if I can stop. I think
To record this.
Oh my goodness. What's this?
Over and out.
All right. Bye.
So I looked